morning, everyone. I'm glad you could be here and enjoy this weekend. I just, first of all, want to thank John for inviting me to speak here. I feel it's an honor to speak on behalf of our brothers and sisters from the other side of the family of Islam. And I'm just glad to be able to present this today. Before we begin, I'd like to offer a prayer. Father in heaven, I just thank you that we have this opportunity to come before you. And we thank you for the blessings you've blessed us with. Help us to share this with others, especially in the family with Islam. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. I guess I got to go back to Africa to share just real briefly how I got involved with sharing with Muslims. I remember sitting in a crowded bus, and my backpack was full of literature, as it always is, and I'm handing out literature in this bus wherever we go, and I always run out because I never have enough. And so all the literature is distributed, and I'm trying to get comfortable in this bus with the potholes and everything, and I'm trying to rest on this long journey. And all of a sudden there's a tap on my shoulder, and I look up and I go, oh wow, here's a Muslim standing there. Was he upset? Was he angry with me, or what's the deal, But I noticed that he was not angry or upset. Quite the contrary. He had his hands folded like this, and he was begging in African style. He was begging. He asked me in Swahili if he could have some of that literature that the others got, and he didn't. And I said, oh, pole sana. I said, I've run out, and there's no more. But he, his eyes just spoke to me, and he said, I really want some of this literature. I said, I'll tell you what, you give me your address, and I'll send you some. So that's what I did. I got the man's address, and it just startled me to think that here's a Muslim, and he was reading obviously over the shoulder of someone else he was writing with there, and the title of the article was How Sin Began, and it's from Patriarchs and Prophets, one of the chapters that was translated into Swahili. And he read that because in Islam it's not clearly defined how sin began, and so he had an interest in that. And I believe Muslims have a deep interest in what you and I have to say. And I guess this whole series, I'm trying to condense it down to three sessions, is how do we connect with this people group? Where do we even start? How do we do that? So that's the title of his Children of the East in Bible Times and Beyond. If Muslims can see they are connected to the Bible, it's a whole new day. It really is. Once they see that they're in the scriptures, it's a whole different day. Here's the website, Salah Allah, and this has all the 40 tracks, different subjects, actually there's 41. And the 41st track just came off. It's not a track, it's actually a magazine, the 41st one. And I've got about 3 boxes coming, and they're freebies. You guys can hand them out to your Muslim friends and neighbors. The 41st one is called Allah's Solemn Warning. It's the 3 angels' messages for Islam. It's a 16-page, 10 font in paper, in magazine format, and Lord willing, we'll have those here this afternoon, maybe, hopefully, all weekend. But that's the website. On Zechariah 8:7, the Lord says, behold, I will save my people from the east country and from the west country. So there's God's people in the east country, and there's lots of them. Lots of them don't believe like you and I believe. They don't know. They haven't got a clue. That's where you and I come in. Here's another verse from Jeremiah 23:3. I will gather the remnant of my flock out of how many countries? All countries. And so his flock, remember that word flock, is in all countries. That includes the Middle East, the nations of Islam, Indonesia. But we want to make, how can we as Seventh-day Adventists, how can we make this breakthrough with Islam, right? I mean, we've tried for years, and it seems like we're making very few headways. Sometimes in East Africa, some places, there's quite a few Muslims that have joined the church. But for the most part, how do we make breakthrough through this huge people group? Some time ago, we're from Alberta. That was Johan and Laura, by the way, playing violins, and Michelle is over here, my wife. Some time ago, we were in Lethbridge. We attended church there, Lethbridge, Alberta. And Sabbath afternoon, we were walking along this footpath. They just put down new asphalt, maybe the fall before. And so there's about a pathway about 3-4 inches deep. And as we're walking along, we noticed there's these bumps all over this asphalt. These bumps right here. And we go, what's going on here? I mean, this is just brand new asphalt put down, 6 months ago in the fall. And now here in the springtime, there's these bumps all over the place. So what is causing these bumps? What could possibly be poking through this hard surface? And I didn't have to wonder very long, and I found out it was a lowly dandelion. And these bumps were all over the place, and some of them were already poking out. And it wasn't a jackhammer, making a hole in here, or some big piece of dynamite blasting a hole in there. It was a dandelion. And then penetrating through this almost impenetrable asphalt. But there it was. There is that soft, tender plant making its inroad through that hard surface. There had to be several hundred pounds per square inch trying to push through that. But it wouldn't give up, even though their great odds were against it. And they were all over the place poking through. And I believe that nature teaches that God has given this message to Seventh-day Adventists, that we can make a breakthrough by the grace of God through this, what seems like an impenetrable, huge people group. Nature teaches us that God will open a way, and we just need to press ahead. We need to stop resisting God's movements. I think that's one of the biggest things in my life. I need to stop resisting God's movement. Where God is moving, stop resisting him. And go forward with him. Someone asked this question: will Muslims be lost if we fail to take the gospel, the three angels' messages of the gospel, to them? Will they be lost? And someone else said, that's a bad question. There's a better question. I said, really? He said, this is a better question. He said, will we be saved if we fail to accomplish our task? And I agree, that is a better question. Will we be saved? Can we be so bold to think that we can ever walk the streets of gold while we refuse to take the three angels' message to Islam? If God has called us, then there must be a way to reach Islam. There has to be some way. Because God would never ask you to do something that he himself in his infinite wisdom would know it's impossible to do. So there has to be a way. Many are even fearful to approach Muslims. I don't know how many times I've had these seminars and people have come up to me afterwards and said, I'm so thankful you came, because now I can go to my Muslim neighbor and I can talk to him and not be afraid. I can open the Quran, and I don't have to be afraid of him. Here's just a little bit of history lesson we want to just cover briefly. Where did Islam come from, and what does it mean? It came from a man by the name of Muhammad. Most of you probably know that. He lived from 570 AD to 632 AD. That time frame is important. 570 AD to 632 AD. And he claimed he was a direct descendant of Ishmael. And that's also important. And he actually claimed that he was through the line of Nebajoth, Ishmael's firstborn. And Islam, incidentally, marks their beginning to the year 622. And Muhammad began a religion called Islam, which means submission to God. And so a Muslim, a Muslim is someone who is submitted to God. And that's not a bad thing, is it? No, it's a good thing. And so if we are truly submitted to God, guess what we are? Yeah. But Muhammad brought the monotheism, the belief in one God, back to the Arabs of that day. It was one of the many reforms that he started. Some of the other reforms that he did in his early years was that he got them to throw out all the idols out of the Kaaba. Not to worship any other idols but the one true living God. And He also brought in reforms to get rid of all the alcohol, so they dumped it in the streets, and there were several other things, be kind to their women and so on. And so, at least in the beginning of Muhammad's time, there was some major reforms that took place that you have to look and say, something was going on here. And I don't believe the devil was doing that. Something was happening. He must have had some kind of connection for that to take place. And here's what his message was. It was a warning of repentance towards God. Why? The day of judgment is approaching. That was his message. Anything wrong with that? That's fantastic. It almost sounds like Seventh-day Adventist, doesn't it? Repentance towards God. Why? Because the day of judgment is approaching. Seventh-day Adventist message is the hour of his judgment is come. So we have something in common, don't we? We can talk to Muslims about judgment. And they'll talk to you for hours on the judgment. And they fear the judgment. That's why they go through all these forms. That's why they go through the mosque 5 times a day and so on. They want to have everything just right because they fear the judgment. And so we have a lot to talk to them about. Today, the numbers of adherents to Islam is roughly 23 to 25% of the earth's population. And that, my friends, is just huge. We as Seventh-day Adventists, especially the young people, every young person here, no matter who you are, even if you don't have Muslims living in your area, you have got to learn something how to connect with Muslims. We have got to, because this thing is staring us in the face, and you never know where God is going to put you. You've got to know how to relate to these people. It's so vital, and it's not difficult. It really isn't. Here's why. Back in 1950, the adherence to Islam was about 500 million. That's 63 years ago. 500 million. Today, it's a staggering 1.56 billion people. In 63 years, they increased 1 billion people. Do you think it's important for us as Seventh-day Adventists to know how to relate to these folks? Huh? I mean, just let another 20 years go by, if God lets us. The increase of these people, we've got to learn how to deal with these people, how to relate to them. Here's a little bit so we're going to go into lessons of the Bible a little bit here, because this is really important, because a lot of this information is not in the Quran. They have to go to the Bible to get it, like the history of Ishmael and Hagar. It's not in the Bible. It's not in the Quran. The only place it is in the Bible. And so they'll listen to these stories. I remember being in my head elder. I was pastoring in northern British Columbia, and head elder comes to me and he says, "You've got to meet this Muslim. He's a pharmacist in one of the big grocery stores. He has his shop right inside." And so I went over there and one day, and I hadn't dialogued that much with Muslims. This is back quite a few years ago now. And I was in the dog food aisle, not that I wanted to buy dog food, but I was praying. I said, "Lord, there he was in his cubicle over there. Now, how do I connect with this guy?" And so I did, and he was very kind. He is from Jordan, tall, bald-headed, just a very pleasant kind of a person. I could tell that people really liked to deal with him. As he came to the pharmacy, he was counting out pills, 2s and 3s, and then he was very pleasant. So how do I connect with this guy? So he did, and he asked me if I was willing to come to a coffee shop after he closed and visit with him. I said, sure, I'd be delighted. And I didn't know what I was in for. I really didn't. And so he thought I was just like another Christian. So we met at the coffee shop at 6:30. I had my herbal tea and he had his coffee. And for the next 40 minutes, he just laid into me. Wow, I did not believe what I was in for. It was like a machine gun. He was blasting away, why I can't accept Islam and what's wrong with Christianity. And he just went on and on and on. And you're going to meet that. But you know what? Jesus met that. And don't let it faze you. Then I started off, I said, well, Mahdi, I said, I just wanted to relate to you that I found something in the Bible that's really neat about Islam. And his jaw just about dropped. He was dead silent. And so for the next hour, I was relating him to things that you're going to learn this weekend. I was relating to him these stories from the Bible of how God's people, if the children of the East were connected with the Israelites all through the Bible. And for the next hour, he was just dead silent. He was just drinking it in. I said, Molly, look, it's 9:30. I got to go. We've already been there for a couple hours. And he says, no. He says, I want to hear more. I want to hear more of this. And so another hour goes by. I'm here with this guy for 2 hours. He hardly says a word now. And he says, what? He just kept wanting more, and I just kept sharing. And finally I said, look, I got to drop this off. I'm just going to get way too late. I got to get home and so on. But that began a really neat relationship. And from then on, he never launched into me anymore. It was a totally different picture. We became friends. And our families went back and forth. We had meals together. All because I knew some of the stuff from the Bible that I'm sharing with you here the next couple of days. 2 groups of people came from Abraham, the children of the East through Hagar and Keturah. This is important. Remember, those are the 2 other wives that Abraham had. After Sarah died, he married Keturah. And Hagar, of course, we're going to get into that story. Genesis 25. Then the children of Isaac or Israel, Sarah, the first wife of Abraham. Those are the 2 groups of people. Genesis 15:5. This is where God brings Abraham outside, and he says, look towards the heavens. And if you can count the stars, he says, if you're able to number them, so shall thy seed be. That's what he told Abraham, if you're able to do that. And the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river Egypt. Okay, from the river Egypt. This is the covenant that God made with Abraham that same day when he is telling him about, if you can number the stars, that's how many descendants you're going to have. And this is the land that God promised to Abraham and to his descendants. From the river Egypt, the Nile, unto the river Euphrates. This was the area in red. Here's the Euphrates and here's the Nile. And this promise was made to Abraham before he had any children. No children. So that's quite a hunk of land, this whole business right here. And just give you an idea, where's the oil wealth today in the Middle East? There it is. All promised to Abraham's descendants. And now we know the story. Sarah, Abraham's wife, bare him no children, right? After this promise, time goes by and things just don't happen. There's no children. And they had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarah says to Abraham, behold, now the Lord has restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarah. And Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, her maid the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. Hagar. In Genesis 16. The history of the Arabs and to much of Islam today traces back to Hagar, the second wife of Abraham. When Sarah did not bear any children, the followers of God that day, who? The followers of God that day decided to take matters in their own hand. They had waited long enough. We've got to do something. Even to the point of blaming God that she had not borne children. So they went ahead without a biblical record, I should say, of first praying when they had this board meeting that day. There's no record of praying, asking for God's blessing, or if this was even wise for them to do this. And this story is not found in the Quran. That's why it's so important to know the complete story, because as you're visiting with Muslims, they will listen to this because this relates back to the mother of their people group. Hagar means immigrant. That's what the word means. How would you like to be called immigrant? Oh, that immigrant. But she must have been a very special person, because Abraham and Sarah, they obviously knew her character. She had lived among them. She was their servant. You know, she did the dishes well. She carried the water. She picked up Abraham's socks. I mean, they knew her. And they wouldn't pick someone who is immoral or a questionable character, would they? Because they knew about genetics. They knew that some of these traits are carried on, passed on to the children. And so they wouldn't pick someone. And so I think there was some very noble traits about Hagar. And now they came up with this plan, and she submitted to that plan of these professed people of God. It was not her idea. She didn't have any say-so. She was selected for this task of producing offspring for Abraham. And the Bible says she conceived, and when she saw that she conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. I mean, it's a big thing. It's huge in the Middle East. African countries the same way. If a woman cannot bear children, it's a real disaster. They feel terrible. And now here, I mean, can you picture this in the home? Now she's became proud. So, hey, I used to be the servant girl. Now I'm Abraham's wife, and I'm bearing the only offspring. I mean, Sarah must have felt just horrible. And she became proud. Pride sets in. Now she's somebody. She's Abraham's wife. She's carrying the only heir. Now that once peaceful home, no longer peaceful. By taking this second wife, the affections are divided. But Abraham said to Sarah, "Behold, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee." And when Sarah dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. It had to be pretty fierce what happened there, because she finally said, "I've had it. I'm out of here." So she ran. She went through stress, so much so that she flees. She's going back to Egypt. She's going back home. And she's carrying Abraham's son. The Bible says the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness on the way to shore. She's heading back to Egypt. The angel of the Lord found her. The angel said to her, "Hagar, Sarah's servant, where have you come from and where are you going?" And she said, "I'm running away from my mistress Sarah." So how should we consider Islam today? I think there's one of the best ways we know how to consider Islam is when we go back to these Bible stories and find out, how did God treat the mother of this people group? How did he treat them? Heaven invested a tremendous amount of interest in Hagar, the mother of the Arabs and much of Islam today, in the very beginning. And here's what the angel of the Lord told her: to return. To do what? To go back. Go back and submit thyself under her hand. This is heaven's command. Told her to submit. To who? To Sarah. Whatever she tells you, you just do it. This is one of the first times in Bible history when the great I Am came to visit somebody in person. And it was to Hagar. One of the first times in Bible history. It was to Hagar, the slave woman, in Abraham's home. Told her to go back. The mother of this vast people group, when she hears heaven speak to her, she submits without question. She didn't argue with the angel of the Lord, with the great I Am. She submitted to God. And when God speaks to you and I, this is a terrific lesson for us. When God speaks to you and I, we hear his voice speaking to us through the word or through whatever other avenue God uses to speak to you. It's for us to humbly submit and say, "Yes, Lord. Help me to listen and help me to do," without questioning. So I ask, could it be that if this woman, Hagar, figuratively represents a religious body, and at the end of time, when the call is made to submit to God and his word, is it possible, and that's what I want to leave with you this as we get into this weekend, is it possible that many will obey the call of God and will come out and stand with God's people? And that's what this seminar is all about. Hagar is told that by the angel of the Lord that she is with child, and the child Ishmael, told her to name the child, means God hears. The name of the child Ishmael means God hears. It's interesting also that heaven named 8 male babies in the Bible. I don't know if you know that, but I traced them all down, and I think I found them all. There's 8. I thought it was 7, but I actually found one more, and there's 8. And the first that heaven names is Ishmael. And the last one that's named is Jesus. And so I go, okay, he's in a pretty good lineup. There's 8 baby boys that are named by heaven, and he's the first one. And this is what else the angel of the Lord said. I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. A thought struck me. This is the same promise that God gave to Abraham when he took him out in Genesis 15:5. He said, look toward the heavens. If you can count the stars, this is how your seed's going to be. Now the same promise is given to Hagar, the servant woman. This is the first of 4 blessings. 4 blessings given to Hagar and Ishmael from the heavenly messenger. And here they all are. The first one was Genesis 16:10, and you can write these down. 4 blessings from God to Ishmael. And so I'm telling this to Mahdi. I said, look, there's blessings to your people group in the Bible. What kind of a Muslim do you think will say, no, I don't want to hear that? No, they'll all want to hear it. And you got to know these blessings. 4 blessings. Because they want to be blessed by God. They really do. And so here you are as a Seventh-day Adventist, and you can share with Muslims, you know, God has blessed your people group. Here, let me share with you where it says this. Everybody get those? Genesis 16:10, 17:20, 21:13, and 21:18. The angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, and thou shalt bear a son. Thou shalt call his name Ishmael. Why? Because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. She was afflicted in Sarah's home. She may have brought it on herself, some of it, but she was afflicted. And God heard her affliction. When you're afflicted, no matter what you're doing, God hears you. He sees you. And you may be in a foreign country and going through tough times, but God sees what's going on. He's there to comfort you. I mean, look, he went to the servant woman in Abraham's home and talked to her. He has just as much interest in you and I. And then the angel says, he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. I want to, leave you with one of these thoughts. Is it possible? Is it possible, because of the prenatal influences of the stressful and the contention in the home, that Ishmael became a wild man? Is that possible? I think it is possible. Who knows? But Hagar returns home. And can you imagine the story she has to tell when she's back? You know, I don't know if it's in the Bible history and all. God came to Abraham in a dream in the past, but I don't think he came in person. She could say, hey, God came to me, told me to go back. And so here I am. It was humbling for her to admit, she's come back home. So Ishmael is born. His name means God's hears. I can't see that clock very good back there. Am I fine? Okay. Okay. I've got about 30 left, 30 slides. But Ishmael born, his name means God hears. And then later, Isaac is born. You remember what his name is? Laughter. So I go, okay, shouldn't Christians call more of their children Ishmael? God hears? Isaac is a good name, don't get me wrong, but you know what I'm saying? Ishmael, God hears, instead of laughter. So he's looked upon as the blessing of Abraham, through whom the blessings of Abraham would come. This is what they saw. When Ishmael was born, they thought, this is it, this is the heir. At this time, Abraham was 86 years old. And for the next 14 years or so, the focus of all of Abraham's affection is on who? On his son. That's all he had for the next 14 years. His mind is that this is the heir to not only his wealth, but the covenant blessings of God would come upon Ishmael. And you can be sure that he told Ishmael this. What father wouldn't? But now in Genesis 17, Abraham is now 99 years old, and God appears to him. It says, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, 14 years later. And through this whole scenario in chapter 17, as you get to the end, you know what Abraham says? After he hears all this, he says, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. In his mind, he couldn't get past his roadblock. He said, it's Ishmael. And God promises to Abraham, he will also bless Ishmael because he is your son. But the covenant of the promised Redeemer would come through Isaac from Sarah. And the Bible says in Genesis 21, the Lord visited Sarah, and she bare Abraham a son in her old age, and Abram called him Isaac. And it says the child grew and was weaned, and Abram made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. And there's a big celebration for Isaac. He's being weaned. He's the promised son from Sarah. I mean, this is an incredible miracle that happened. But the tables are turned for Ishmael and Hagar. You can think about that. There's no record in the Bible that they made a big celebration when Ishmael was weaned, but now Isaac is weaned, and there's a big hoopla. So they knew, we're out of the picture now. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian mocking. Of course, they didn't do right. They did the wrong thing. But nonetheless. And she says, cast out this what? This bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. She said, out. And the Bible says the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. This was his firstborn. And in the Middle East and in African countries, the firstborn, to be the firstborn son is huge. It's absolutely huge. It's a major thing. And so back to the desert she went. This time she's driven out. An account says that Abraham rose early in the morning, and he took bread and water and gave it to Hagar, and the child was sent away. She departed in the wilderness. And Muslims to this day, they sense rejection. They really do, to this day. They want to be accepted who they are. The Bible says the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of their shrubs. And Hagar says, let me not see the death of the child. And she lifted up her voice and wept. Wow, what a situation. And it says, and God heard the voice of the lad. And the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, what aileth thee, Hagar? It's what kind of a question is that? But, the angel of the Lord comes to her. What ails you, Hagar? Fear not. I mean, what comfort. For God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. So here, the great I am, Jesus, he comes the second time to Hagar and Ishmael in their distress. Can you imagine what is going through her mind? She's a slave in Abraham's home. She was chosen to bear this offspring from God's people. She didn't have anything to say about this. She submitted. And now, next thing she knows, she's cast out. No sustenance, no support, in the wilderness, alone. God comes to comfort her. The angel says, arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. Here's one of the other promises, one of the 4 promises. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and God was with the lad. Islamic tradition holds that the well, there's a well over here this is the Kaaba. About 20 meters away, there's a well of water. And they claim that this is the well that was opened for Ishmael and Hagar back in here, that is still flowing to this day. It's called Zamzam. And they say it's the very site where the first house of worship was built by Abraham for Hagar and Ishmael. Because everyone knows that Abraham would pay visits to his son from time to time. You can't tell me he wouldn't. And he would try to instill the worship of the true Creator God in the heart of this teenage boy and the mother. He would do that. Yes, he would. Especially if in the Middle Eastern mindset, they would do that. So I think this story is very possibly true. Then it says in Genesis 25, 1 and 2, then again Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. This is all really important, you'll soon see. And she bare him, so he had some more children with Keturah. Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Isbak, and Shua. So far there's Ishmael the firstborn, and Isaac, and then these other 6 sons. These are all the sons of Abraham, as much as Isaac was the son of Abraham. These are all sons of Abraham. And God has invested interest in the sons of Abraham as well as he invested in Isaac, because the sons of Keturah and of Ishmael are listed twice in the Bible, all of them. That should tell us something. I mean, if they weren't important, they wouldn't be there, right? But no, they're written there. They're there. So Abram grows old. He grows really old. And before he dies, the Bible says Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. But unto the sons of the concubines which Abram had, God gave gifts. Verse is really important. Genesis 25, 5 and 6. So before Abraham dies, he splits up his inheritance. He gives everything to Isaac, but he has gifts that he gives to the other sons, and he sends them away. Notice, sent them away from Isaac his son while he yet lived, and he sent them eastward unto the east country. And so collectively, these other sons of Abraham became known as the children of the east, both from Hagar and from Keturah. That's how we get to know the name the children of the east. The sons of Abram from Hagar and Keturah. This is the great man of faith who was called to sacrifice his son, and his son was ransomed, remember, by the ram caught in the thicket. This Bible story is huge. The Bible has the complete story because Islam remembers this special event. This is like our Christmas, and it's coming up again, this celebration. I remember I was in a dental hygienist's office, and he was a Muslim, and I knew that. I wanted to visit him, just a dialogue. And he happened to be born, he's from Pakistan, and he happened to be born in the Seventh-day Adventist hospital. So he was one of the few Muslims that I met that knew about Seventh-day Adventist. I said, Assalamu Aleikum, and that's a term we're gonna all learn, I hope anyway. Because it's so important to learn the greeting. Assalamu Alaikum. Learn that greeting. We're gonna have cards to hand out later on. If I give them to you now, you're gonna read it and you won't pay attention, so we're gonna wait till you're done. And so anyway, I handed this dental hygienist this tract, and it was on the ransom with a great sacrifice. It's this whole story from the Quran, a bit from the Quran, and then it leads into this whole Bible story about this whole story about his son being ransomed. And he took this dental hygienist took it. His name was Muhammad. He took it and he read it. He was reading it, and I went to the counter to pay my dues. And he had this cubicle, and his head kept coming around this cubicle, looking, staring at me as if in disbelief. Who is this guy? Greeted him in Arabic and so on. And then finally he did this several times, and he came out, a big grin, and he took me by the hand, and he shook me heartily. He says, I never knew this story was in the Bible. So, you can be a blessing to these people. They'll listen to what we have to say. That was his reaction. Thank you for sharing this with me, he said. And this led also into another dialogue between our families back and forth. I don't have time to discuss that. But Abraham, in Genesis 25:8, Abraham dies. He's old, right? 175 years. That's really old. And the Bible says his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him in the cave of Machpelah. At the end of Abraham's long and eventful life, the Bible pictures his two sons, the first two-born sons, coming together to bury their father. It's a touching scene, no doubt. But there's no record of turmoil. And this is the first record when the sons of Isaac and Ishmael come together again for a purpose. Isaac, you know how old he is by now? He's 75 years old. And Ishmael, he's 89. They're old timers. The Bible has other numerous stories of the interaction between these two families. And that's what we want to cover in these series. Where else do these families come together and link up? Because this is really important. Here's where it says that Ishmael had 12 sons, one of the accounts, Genesis 25:13 through 15. And this is really important. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebajoth. And then there's Kedar, Abdiel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadar, and Tima, Jetu, Naphish, and Kedema. Because we're going to talk more about this. God blessed Jacob with 12 sons. Isaac's son, Jacob, had 12 sons, who became the 12 tribes of Israel. God also blessed Ishmael, the other side of the family, with 12 sons. And they became known as the 12 tribes. The Bible tells us that Ishmael lived to be 137 years old. Now here's something that's very interesting. Remember all this land from this river, the Nile, and the river Euphrates, all this in here? Remember all that land that was promised to Abraham's heir, to his son? Had Abraham remained true, that would have all been Isaac's land. But now, because they did this deed, he had other children, now the land had to be divided among the other sons. And the portion that ended up being Isaac's was this small, tiny portion called Israel. Isaac got a very small portion. Because here's a promise. Deuteronomy 21, 15 through 17. Now this is really interesting. If a man have two wives, you've probably read this before. The one wife is beloved and the other is unloved. And you know right away which story I'm talking about, right? This is God's principles he's setting up now. If a man has two wives, the one is loved, the other unloved. And both the loved and the unloved bore him children. And if the firstborn belongs to the unloved, which is the case here in Abraham's situation, right? The firstborn belongs to her that was driven out. Then on the day when he assigns his possessions as an inheritance to his sons, he may not treat the son of the loved as the firstborn in preference to the son of the unloved, who is the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the unloved, by giving him how much? A double portion of all that he has. This is God's promise. For he is the first fruits of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. Who had the right of the firstborn? Ishmael. What was promised to him? A double portion. And God has made up for that. You look at the world of Islam today, the Middle East. Who has the majority of the land? Who has the oil wealth? Double portion. It's gone to Ishmael. Now here's the conclusion. Will the God of heaven who intervened in the life of Hagar and Ishmael, he promised 12 sons to Ishmael, who had invested this incredible interest in all the sons of Abraham, can we even think that he will close the doors of probation without giving them an equal opportunity to know what we as Seventh-day Adventists know, what the Bible teaches about the close of Earth's history? It's unthinkable. It really is. God wants these to know. He's going to give them an equal opportunity. Because Muslims have a blood-bought right to hear and to know what you and I know about the judgment and God's law and God's mercy and Jesus the Messiah and all that is written in the books of Daniel and Revelation regarding the last days. They have a blood-bought right to know this. And dear friends, love will find a way, no matter how hard that surface is that we think it is, or that wall to penetrate. Love will find a way. That soft, tender plant, that dandelion, pushed its way against great odds. The Bible says the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which is lost. Now, in the closing moments, we don't have much time. There's a talking points card that we want to hand out. Where's Michelle? She's here. You have somebody doing that. Okay. This is a talking points card. This is an example. Someone said, well, how do I relate to Muslims? How can I do this? How can I even begin? Well, I always introduce myself as a Seventh-day Adventist when I talk to Muslims. The reason I don't tell them I'm a Christian is because their mentality, idea of a Christian is far different than what you think it is. When you say Christian to a Muslim, he thinks someone who eats pork, who drinks alcohol, who bows down to idols, they gamble, and they worship Mary, and so on. And so when I introduce myself generally to Muslims, I tell them I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And I had an experience when I went to the Philippines. I'm flying back, and I always order vegetarian meals, and the stewardess comes by, she says, have you got your meal? And I mean, did you order vegetarian? I said, yes. And she says, well, it'll be here shortly. And so I'm sitting there very patiently, getting ready to eat, and because the food is a big thing. And so another stewardess comes by 20 minutes later with my vegetarian meal, and she asked the guy behind me, did you order vegetarian? He said, oh, so there went my meal. And so a little bit later, another stewardess comes by, here's your pork sandwich, sir. I said, well, I ordered vegetarian, and she apologized up and down, Meanwhile, he's munching away at my lunch behind me. And I thought to me, I got to find out who is this? Who's eating my lunch? That's the way I am. And so we landed. I was flying Asian Airlines, and they serve a lot of pork, and so you want to make sure you get your vegetarian meals, ordered all down ahead of time. So we finally landed. I think it was somewhere in Europe or whatever. And everybody's getting up, and that person got up, and before I turned around, I heard the word Alhamdulillah, and I said, "Oh man, they're Muslims." So I turned around, and I greeted them, Assalamu Aleikum. By the way, that's on your card, which means peace be upon you. It's Arabic, Assalamu Alaikum. May peace be upon you. And so I said that to him. And I introduced myself. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And I told him, went down something like what it says right there. You know what he said? He said, "We've heard of you people." And instantly they were Saudi Arabian businessmen. They didn't want to eat the pork sandwiches either. They just didn't go through the channels of ordering their lunch. Instantly, his hand went into his pocket. He pulled out a business card and he gave it to me. Just like that. Just that quick. "We've heard of you people." Just like that. So I got his email address. His postal address, everything. And I shipped him a book in Saudi Arabia. This is how easy as we can connect with these people. In East Africa, at least, and many other places, the fact that you don't eat pork is huge to Islam, in the minds of a Muslim. They will almost automatically consider you clean because you will not eat pork. And they feel comfortable sitting down at your table because they know they're not going to get fed pork or alcohol. And so learn that phrase, Assalamu Alaikum, when you meet a Muslim. And if you stumble through it, don't worry. They'll love you for it. Do the best you can. You just never know what's going to happen when you do that. And I've got lots of stories to share. And so in our continued study tomorrow, Lord willing, we're going to continue looking at how the two families interfaced in Bible history. I think it'll help you if you haven't got a new perspective on how you look at Islam. And this is from a Seventh-day Adventist understanding. And I don't know how much time you have, John, but can we do time for a question-answer type thing, a short segment of time? If anyone has a question, I'm not a big professor of this, but if anyone has a question, maybe you had a burning desire to know something about Islam or what to do or what to say, or I just want to open the floor to, yes, there's a hand over here.
Clarify why sometimes you refer to them as Islam and then Muslim.
Yeah, Islam is the religion. Islam means those that are submitted, and Muslims are people. The question was, how is it that sometimes we use the word Islam and other times Muslims? And so I think they got a mic here now for you. Okay, good. Yes, I think there was a hand. Go ahead. Sorry?
He shall also have his glorious hand, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape from his hand. Even Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon.
Yeah, that's good stuff, isn't it? Where are you quoting from? That's right. I don't know how many of those things we're going to look at this weekend, but we're going to look at some of those things. Excellent. There's 3 that escape out of his hand. And every one of those are children of the East that are mentioned. It's going to get exciting as we look at some of this stuff tomorrow, Lord willing. Is there any other question? Yes.
Yeah, in Thailand, I went to the markets, the fruit markets, and I pulled up in front of the markets, and there was a Muslim man there. He spoke English. He was from Burma, and greeted me, and we talked a little bit, and he knew, I explained that I'm an Adventist, and we talked about different things. I won't go into details, but he now calls me brother. Every time he sees me, he calls me brother. And so for me, I want to know how to go to the next step with this man.
Yeah, we're very close. We're very close. The same thing happened to me with Mahdi and other Muslims. I'm in an airport, and this was back before I had this computer. The old computer, the battery's life is very, very low, and so I'm always looking for a Coke machine, not because I drink Coke, but because I'm looking for a plug-in. And so I found this plug-in in the Calgary airport. The Coke machine was there, and I'm sitting there in an uncomfortable position. And this guy walks by me. He's kind of loud. And he says, hey, come over here. There's a seat where you can sit in. You can plug it in. He goes, I didn't find it. I said, okay. He says, unless you're comfortable like that. And I says, no, I'm not comfortable at all. And so I pack up my computer, and I walk over there, and he's kind of loud, so I don't sit right next to him. I'm like, who is this guy, Canadians are usually kind of quiet. And so I'm just plugging in just a little bit away from him. And then the intercom comes on. Someone from the kiosks says, Muhammad so-and-so, can you come to the podium? And up he pops, and he goes to the podium. I go, wow, man, this guy's a Muslim. He was trying to help me out. So he comes back, and I said, hey, Muhammad, are you Muhammad? He says, yes. And I said, Assalamu Aleikum. And just, he answers back, Wa Alaikum Assalam. And so who are you? I said, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. What? He said, Seventh-day Adventist. He said, I went through the series. This is who we are. He said, really? He said, yeah. And I mean, we visited there for quite a long time, and I'm sharing these tracts with me. They're all on the website, Salah Allah. And they're downloadable free. And so I'm sharing these tracts with him. And he asks questions after question. He is just in my face. He's just very, very interested. And they keep repeating his name from the kiosk there, and he's just ignoring him. It's on the loudspeaker. He's ignoring him. And we talk and talk. Finally, I said, Muhammad, they're trying to get a hold of you. And he's just like he's ignoring it. No, I want to know more. So I've never heard of you people before. And so, and finally, I said, look, they want you to go to another thing because your airplane is leaving. And if you don't go, you'll miss your flight, and then you're going to be stuck here with me. So finally, he went, he left, But we emailed back and forth and stuff, and they want to know. They want to know who you are, what you believe in. They're amazed. Most Muslims will be shocked to find out that there's a group among the people of the book, which they consider the people of the book, that do what we do. Any other questions? There's a microphone there, so they can be.
Between Adventists and Muslims is that we believe that Jesus is God.
Excuse me, Jesus is.
We believe that Jesus is God, right?
The divine. Well, if you take a close look at the Quran and all the verses that talk about Jesus in the Quran, you come away with an understanding. It says, first of all, three times Mary is quoted in the Quran. That says, and she's talking to the angel Gabriel. She says, Gabriel, how can this be? I've never known a man. I've never touched a man. 3 times she says that. He's portrayed as someone without an earthly father. He's portrayed as someone who was born without sin. And no one else in the Quran is mentioned that he was born without sin, except Jesus, the Messiah. If you look at the word Jesus, the Messiah in the Quran, he's always pictured as the Messiah. There's only a few times in the Bible, in Daniel 9, in the Quran, numerous times. He's always referred to as Jesus, the Messiah.
Are you taking your life in your hands when you bring these things up?
No, that's in the Quran. You can say that word. That's from the Quran. That's there. No issues with that. Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of Mary. That's what it says. Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of Mary. Muslims have twisted this to say that he's the Messiah only of the Jews. See? But if you read the Quran the way it is, he's the Messiah.
Do you have these quotes of the Quran in your literature?
Yeah, it's all in that on the website.
Because I started to read the Quran and I get bored.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand some of that. It's different. Yeah.
Rudy, you didn't answer his question.
Whose question?
This gentleman, he said, what is step 2?
Pardon?
He said, what is step 2? What is step 2 in reaching the man in the grocery store, in the marketplace?
I guess I'm not following you.
You didn't answer the question of this gentleman in front of me.
Okay.
He said in the marketplace he's a brother to a Muslim.
Right.
And he says, what is step 2
what
to
is step
reach
2?
this man?
Well, the big thing is to develop relationships. That's big with Islam. There's things that you say right away in the beginning that'll cut off any further dialogue, and your relationship is over. And if you can derail those questions, which I do, they'll ask you stuff like, well, what do you believe in Jesus? How do you see Jesus? Because they want you to say he's divine, and then end of conversation, end of relationship, bang, it's done. I say, well, I say something like this: I like what the Quran says about Jesus, that he was born without an earthly father, that he was born of the Holy Spirit. It's in the Quran. He was born through the Spirit of Allah, and that he was born without sin. And no other baby in the Quran is born without sin, not even Muhammad. And there's no record that he sinned. It's in there. And so that's how I reply to some of those questions to Muslims. Because I want to build a relationship. And once you've built a relationship, there's nothing, that relationship is started. You're friends for life. Then you can discuss anything. They may not agree with you, but you can discuss it. You got to remember, all during this time, the Holy Spirit is there working on their lives, just like he worked on the reason you're here today, the reason that you're here in the Adventist church. Obviously, the Holy Spirit has worked on your heart, right? Well, the same Spirit that worked on your heart works also on the other side of the family, because we can see it happened in the Bible history, right? So the Holy Spirit is there working on these people. He really is. And the things that you say, your attitudes, how you relate to them, if you treat them like a lot of people treat them when they hear the 6 o'clock news, they say, oh, Muslims are all terrorists. They can sense that, they feel that. But if you treat them with love and respect them who they are, it's a whole different world. If you show kindness to them. I hope I answered your second question. That's step 2, to build this relationship. And then, the God has to be in this thing, because we can't manufacture this, what we call conversion or whatever. We can't manufacture that. It's got to be. But I really like what was said last night. I think Calvin or somebody told me that somebody speaking here, I think is what it was. The internet, I believe, I'm a big believer in it, and so on. But what God wants in these last days, he wants living people that can connect with them. Because they want to see, what is the Seventh-day Adventist really like? How does he operate under pressure? How does he operate when his things don't go so well? They want to see that. And so it's going to take live people that dialogue with this people group. I know that. The internet's fine, but he wants people. Now, how God's going to do that, I don't know. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen, friends. And he wants you and I to be a part of it. Yes, there's a question right here. Right there. Thank you.
Well, you know that Ellen White said that she saw people hurrying from place to place.
Yes.
It's people.
Yes.
We need long-term people.
Yes, thousands. Thousands. We're going to get into some exciting Bible prophecies down the road here tonight. Don't miss the next tomorrow at 11 o'clock, and then Saturday night at 7. Because the Bible is loaded with really good stuff that you can relate to Muslims. Calvin.
Yeah, I really like what you shared about sharing with people about Jesus the Messiah from the Quran, because that's all through the Quran. You can't, everywhere you turn, that's what he's called. And what's really interesting is that the Quran does not define what Messiah means. So we have to turn to the Bible.
Thank you, Calvin. Yeah, it's true. Anyone else have a question?
I don't know if this is sort of like an oxymoron, but what if there's like a secular Muslim? Would it be worth it to take the same steps with them? Perhaps?
I do. I treat them like they're religious, very religious and pious. I just treat them. And what it will do, it will almost embarrass them. It will encourage them to, maybe they've dropped the ball a little bit. I encourage them in their worship of the God of heaven. I said, hey, I encourage them. I said, go to the mosque. Pray. Don't miss out on that. You're going to miss out on God's blessing. I encourage them. Do that if you're not doing it. And to hear that from a Christian, I mean, that's, especially a white guy, not from among themselves, they hear it from somebody else. And just encourage them. Because the God can use these experiences to really speak to their heart. And God knows where they're at in their experience. He does. So, yeah, I do. I treat them like a brother, even if they're doing bad things. Just encourage them.
A few years ago, I visited with a Muslim up at Lake Tahoe, and he was saying, man, we're so much alike, as I shared some of, what we believe in the Old Testament. And his wife was saying, he believes more than we do. And he was saying, wife, you're bad. You know, you're going to have to apologize to God. And she was telling him, it's time for your prayers. You know, you need to go pray. But the comment, and I've only got it secondhand from my sister, but she said that, I believe, and I may be incorrect a little bit on this, but Adventist World Radio, a pastor over there, if I understand correctly, a Muslim asked him to come to his house. And he was a little bit apprehensive, and he got there were 30 of them there.
Yeah.
And they said, we're ready for baptism, you know, in a secluded place. And he said, well, we need to study with you. And they said, well, the angel has been here for 30 days. You know, it's come 30 days to study with us. And they knew as much or more than we do.
Yeah. Praise God.
But it's exciting, but it's sad because the angels are having to do the work we're not doing.
It's interesting when I give these presentations, I had quite a long dialogue in East Africa in one of the bigger churches over there. And at the end, these Muslims, former Muslims who had joined the church previously, they came up, one of the guys just hugged me, wouldn't let me go. He said, we've never heard this before. Now I got something to share with my Muslim friends. You know, they're in the Bible, and it really gives them great courage. Some hands up over here.
I just want to praise God for what you're doing, what you're sharing, and that you're making resources available for people to have to help and to bless our brothers and our sisters in this. And I'm just so overwhelmed with what you're doing. I appreciate the practicalness of it. Just thank God very much.
Well, I just thank God. I really want to pursue this that much, but a friend of mine asked me, Stephen Dickey asked me to come to a Islamic convention, something like our general conference sessions. And the first one I went to is in Chicago. I'll relate some of the experiences we had. We actually had an exhibit booth in a Islamic convention. They allowed us to have that. And we had something on health. And let's see, where was I going to go with that? Oh, there's so many stories. I just had a moment there. I didn't know what I was going to say here. But yeah, all these Muslims would come by, you know, at our exhibit booth. And what I found out was, and now I remember, I was visiting all these other exhibit booths, and one of the exhibit booths that they had, and this is all Muslims, all of them were Muslims, and so we were kind of the only people that weren't Muslims. And so I went to this, I want to see, you know, what makes these people tick, and what are they have all literature, they're into this literature and books and all that kind of stuff. This one booth had all these tracts about Islam and how wonderful it is, and all these subjects. I looked at that, and I go, why don't we have Adventists have something like that? We can share with them. I said, this is terrible. And so I went home and started to write tracts. This is a few years back. And so I get about into tract number 6, and one day it hits me. You know, I'm pastoring, and at night I got to get up because I got to work on this stuff in a half an hour every time I can get up and get a few hours in to work on this stuff because I got my other work to do during the day. So I'm working on these tracts, and we're living off grid. Calvin knows about us. And so in the morning, I got to start up the generator, right? Because the day before I had this thought, why are you doing this? I mean, you know, you're up here and you're pastoring. Why are you bothering putting these tracts together? So I felt kind of discouraged about that. And the next morning I start the generator, and I tripped the bar, the breaker, you know, that bar where you plug everything in. I tripped that, and computer comes on, and my printer comes on. And I never gave it a command, but the printer comes on, and it makes that noise, ka-chung, 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 before it's going to print. I go, what's going on here? So the paper spits out a piece of paper like this, and I turn it around. I was just shocked. I said, the Lord answered my request. On those tracks, there's a picture of 3 mosques, or several mosques, and there's 3 angels flying over the mosques. Well, there wasn't just a little emblem on there, but the whole thing was filled up with those mosques and the 3 angels. It filled up the whole page, and I kept it, and I dated it, and I have it at home. And that came out, and that gave me encouragement that, you know, God wants this to happen. He really does. And right now, we printed 10,000 of these tracts. 10,000, they're all gone. General Conference took a lot of them at that time, but they're getting re-edited right now, and so I'm hoping, I already have confirmation to get them reprinted. They will be available very shortly. So not only are you on the internet, I'll also be able to have them so you can hand them out. They're really good quality, colorful, and so on. But I just needed to do a few mistakes here and there, you know, some glitches and stuff, and so we're getting all those straightened out. But yeah, it's We need materials. And if there's a young person here, take this seriously about reaching Islam. Maybe God is laying this on your heart, or somebody here today maybe that, hey, 1.56 billion people. That's a lot of people. And maybe God is calling you to get interested in this work. There is some resources out here now that you can research and study. This has been years in putting this together, and it's available. Hoping to have a little table, John. We have some of the resources available. Some of them are free, some of them we're asking some money for it. But I just think we need to close because I see that our time is running out. Shall we close with prayer? Kind Father in heaven, we just come before you in thanksgiving, thanking you for the opportunity we have to come together and to share. We ask, dear Heavenly Father, that you would give us courage and not be afraid to visit with Muslims when we see them, and to treat them as we would a brother. So guide us in our walk with you, and give us clear direction what you want us to do from day to day. And we just thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.